You see this badge over here? If you were to put this on a block of ice, you would have no problem trying to sell it to an Eskimo. It's no secret that anything that wears this badge sells like hotcakes. In fact, you can find this on almost half the cars sold in this country. So as long as you haven't been living under a rock, you'll know exactly which brand this badge represents. Heck, it even spells it out for you. Toyota is a household name, but the question is, do their products have anything more to offer besides a reputable badge? Well, today let's find out by taking a closer look at the Toyota Corolla Cross. As you may already know, Toyota is the world's biggest car company, and their best-selling model is the Toyota Corolla. In fact, the Corolla is the world's best-selling car, with over 50 million units sold since its inception in 1966. But the thing is, sedans aren't as popular as they used to be, so you really can't blame Toyota for putting the Corolla nameplate on a crossover. The Toyota Corolla Cross may not look like a Corolla, but it definitely looks cross, with its headlights angled towards this huge grille. But kidding aside, it's not totally unworthy of the name because this does ride on the same TNGA platform. But then again, so does 50% of all Toyotas, a number that will rise to 80% by 2023. Anyway, in terms of design, the front end is definitely the most polarizing. It's a love it or hate it affair, and I think that has a lot to do with this huge front grille. However, I do like the blue inserts that you get in the headlights and on the emblem. I think they managed to pull it off quite tastefully. But aesthetics aside, it's an all-LED affair for this top-trim 1.8V variant. You get LED bi-beam headlights, LED DRLs, and even the fog lamps are LED. Along the side, the design becomes less offensive. There's a conservative use of black body cladding, and the body lines aren't over the top. In fact, it gives the car a bit of muscle from a visual standpoint. I also like the placement of the side mirrors because aside from enhancing the look, it also helps with visibility. This top-spec variant rolls on 18-inch wheels wrapped in Michelin tires, and personally, I love the design. As far as I'm concerned, this won't leave you craving for aftermarket wheels when you roll out of the dealership. Behind these wheels are disc brakes, ventilated up front and solid at the back. Moving on to the rear end, you'll see that this is the most conservatively designed part of the car, and to me, conservative is never a bad thing. These taillights are also LED, and you really don't get much else here except for this body-colored accent beneath the black bumper. Opening this rear tailgate is done manually, and despite the fact that a battery pack resides underneath this floor, you still get 487 liters of cargo space, and you can always fold the rear seats down 60-40 in case that isn't enough. However, it's worth noting that you don't get a flat floor when you do that. Now let's go check out the rest of the interior. In true Toyota fashion, what we have here is a no-frills interior. Now, this may not be the most flamboyant cabin out there, but it definitely has you covered with everything you could possibly need, and even some of the things that you'd want. The atmosphere here is relatively dark, literally speaking, because most of the surfaces are black, even the headliner. But it's nice to see that you do get some ambient lighting. Now, there are some hard plastics on top of the dash and below the knee, but everything you interact with is really nice to the touch. The seats are wrapped in leather, and I must say they're actually very comfortable. They're firm, but very comfortable, and they are power adjustable, so it's really easy to find your ideal driving position, especially given the fact that this is a tilt and telescopic steering wheel. I'm also glad that you're not overwhelmed with touchscreens, because nothing beats interacting with physical knobs and buttons when you're operating your audio or HVAC. Toyota has never been inclined to fixing what isn't broken, so I hope they don't jump on the bandwagon and turn everything into touchscreens, similar to what everyone else is doing. Now, a lot of people find the fact that this has a foot brake kind of old school, but for me, I don't mind. In fact, I like the mechanical reassurance that it gives each time you engage the park brake. But in any case, this interior doesn't feel the slightest bit archaic because you still get modern day touches such as this digital instrument cluster. Now you don't get a tachometer, but instead you get an indicator of how you're using the hybrid system's power. Moving on to the infotainment system, you get this 8-inch touchscreen, which also has physical knobs and buttons, which again is a good thing. Now, a lot of people say that the bezel is kind of thick, and I would have to agree with them, but at least you get Android Auto and Apple CarPlay as standard. You also get dual zone automatic climate control, and it's nice to see that you actually get rear air vents because this is a pretty big cabin despite the fact that it's a subcompact crossover. Now the rear seats are actually quite comfortable given the fact that you don't sit too upright. You also get an adequate amount of leg and headroom, and the center tunnel doesn't impede too much. Aside from the rear air vents, other amenities include a center armrest with cup holders, and you also get decently sized bottle holders on both doors. Again, this isn't the fanciest interior out there, and while it does have you covered with everything you could possibly need, the question is whether or not Toyota has more to offer besides a reputable brand. So I think it's time to get this out on the road. Oh, I just turned it off. I forgot it was actually switched on because it's just so quiet. Anyway, let's go. Okay, so before anything else, let's talk about some of the benefits that come with driving a hybrid. And I think the most obvious one is fuel efficiency. Because in unbearable city traffic, you can still get about 12 to 15 kilometers per liter in this thing. And when you take this out on the highway, you can do well over 23 kilometers per liter. Now that's phenomenal. But another bonus is the refinement. Because being a hybrid, it just makes this thing so quiet. And NVH is also really good. Now, some people may say that NVH could be improved, but that's only because the engine is so quiet, so everything else is amplified. It's like being in a library where the slightest noise will lead to a distraction. Now, in terms of power, the engine together with a motor generator provides 120 horsepower and 142 Newton meters of torque. Now, I know those numbers aren't astronomical, but anyone in the market for this really won't be too concerned about how fast this can get to 100 kilometers an hour. What's more important for anyone looking for a crossover as a daily driver is that the power is there when you need it. And in that regard, this truly delivers because the hybrid power plant provides power almost instantaneously. Now, I also want to talk about the fact that this has different drive modes. So one, you can put it on power, and that sharpens the throttle response and makes the car very responsive to your throttle inputs. It actually feels like it has more than 120 horsepower and 142 Newton meters of torque. But if you really want to optimize fuel, you can select Eco mode, and it's actually very usable. It doesn't strain the power out too much. In fact, it never feels flat. But the most efficient way to get around is if you engage EV mode, which will use the electric motor. Although that isn't always available, and it'll depend on how much charge the battery has left. Now, this does have a CVT, and it makes no attempt whatsoever to try to simulate a conventional automatic or a manual transmission for that matter. But it does do a really good job in providing the power when you need it. Now, there is a bit of droning, but like I said, there is always power on tap. And to a lot of people, that's more important. Now, unlike the Corolla Altis, this does not have a multi-link suspension at the back. Instead, it uses a torsion beam suspension. And while torsion beams are prone to more flexing, it really isn't an issue here because the ride is never jarring, and you can still take corners quite confidently. Now, like I often say, one of the most important attributes of good driving dynamics is really the way the car steers. And I must say that Corolla Cross does a really good job in that department because the steering is nicely weighted. It's light, but it does not feel disconnected. And the steering ratio is fairly responsive. But I'd be remiss to end this drive without talking about the fact that this has Toyota Safety Sense, which is a host of safety features and driver's aids such as adaptive cruise control, a pre-collision system, automatic high beam, lane tracking assist, and lane departure alert. The Toyota Corolla Cross 1.8V hybrid can be yours for 1,650,000 pesos. Now, a lot of people will consider this as a compelling option based on the badge alone. But even if you look beyond that, what we have here is a comfortable and practical vehicle with stellar fuel efficiency. Now, I know all that appears to be sensible, but is there anything about this that will actually appeal to your emotions? Well, aside from the calmness that you feel behind the wheel, you're almost certain that this will last you a lifetime. Because let's face it, this is a Toyota, and long-term joy and satisfaction are definitely emotions worth giving into. Thanks for watching.